I'm Olivia Donovan. I'm 33 years old, the proud owner of Donovan Vineyards and Estate, a place where couples from across the country come to toast their future under golden hills and oak beams. But before you picture fairy lights and wine glasses clinking, let me tell you something darker. Because this is not a story about romance. It's a story about betrayal, family, and the day I learned that even blood can turn against you. Before I begin, drop a comment letting me know where you're from. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe, because what you're about to hear is how I nearly lost everything to my own brother's wedding. When you grow up with nothing, you cling to each other. My brother Jacob and I didn't just share DNA, we shared survival. Our mother died when I was 11 and he was only 4. Our father did his best for a while, but when I was 22 and Jacob 15, he was gone too. That meant bills unpaid, birthdays uncelebrated, and a silence in the house that could crush you if you let it. But it also meant Jacob and I became more than siblings. We became each other's safety net. I took night shifts and business classes, keeping the lights on while he finished high school. He helped in the vineyard, long before it was a real business. It was just rows of struggling vines and a dream too fragile to say out loud. We promised each other we would build a life no one could take away. And for a while, it worked. By 30, I had turned Donovan Vineyards into a place people whispered about, weddings under arched pergolas Jacob built with his own hands, wine that won competitions, sunsets that made magazines beg for photo shoots. Jacob was my right hand through it all. I thought nothing could shake us. Then he met her. Isabel Huntington. She swept in like she owned the world, and maybe she did. Her family name carried weight. Her mother, Margaret Huntington, ran charity galas and sat on boards. Old money, old rules. From the first moment, something in me tightened. Isabel's smile didn't reach her eyes when she shook my hand. "Oh," she said, glancing around the vineyard as if it were quaint rather than grand. "So you're the sister. And you run all this?" It wasn't a question. It was a dismissal, wrapped in sugar. Jacob didn't notice. He was smitten. Within months, weekends that used to belong to pruning vines or family dinners now belonged to her world, country clubs, fundraisers, restaurants where our wine wasn't good enough for the list. When Jacob told me he'd proposed, his voice was pure light. "She said yes, Liv. She wants to marry me here. At the vineyard." And despite everything I felt, I said yes. I blocked off the date. I offered them the estate, waived the fees, even promised to cover upgrades myself. $65,000. My gift, I said. My way of keeping us close. But what I didn't know then was this, that gift would turn into the weapon they used against me. Because while I poured money, time, and heart into my brother's future, Isabel and her mother were already plotting to erase me from it. And when the truth came out, when I discovered that I had been written out of my own brother's wedding after funding it, well, that was the day I stopped being the loyal sister. That was the day I became something else. When you give someone everything, you expect a little gratitude. At least, you expect respect. What I got instead was a masterclass in entitlement. The first time Margaret Huntington set foot on my estate, I knew trouble had arrived. She wore pearls at noon and looked around as though she were judging a courtroom. Her eyes lingered on the vineyard, then on the stone walls of the event hall, and finally on me, as if I were part of the decor. "The view is acceptable," she said, her voice clipped. "But the barrel hall smells agricultural. We'll need to address that." "Address it?" "It's a vineyard. The aroma of oak and fermenting grapes is the soul of the place." But before I could answer, Isabel chimed in with her trademark sugar smile. "Mother just means it could use some refinement. Don't worry, Olivia, we'll make it elegant." I bit my tongue. After all, I had promised Jacob this day would be perfect. Refinement, in their world, meant money. A lot of it. Within a week, the wedding planner, handpicked by Isabel, began sending my coordinator endless lists of necessary upgrades. The chairs had to be reupholstered to match Isabel's color palette. The drapery in the hall had to be replaced. The historic wine press, a family heirloom, needed to be moved because it distracted from the clean sight lines. Every line on that spreadsheet felt like a cut. But I signed off anyway, telling myself it was worth it for Jacob. Worth it for family. The catering became its own battlefield. I had invested years building a reputation for Donovan Vineyards' farm-to-table menus. We sourced local cheeses, raised our own lamb, grew herbs right on the property. Isabel's response? Mother knows several celebrity chefs. Perhaps we could import one of them for the event. Margaret added, we simply want to ensure the guests experience true sophistication. True sophistication. As if the vineyard that Jacob and I built with our bare hands wasn't enough. As if our blood, sweat, and grief didn't count as elegance. Still, I swallowed the insult and smiled. We can create any menu you desire, I said evenly. My chefs are Michelin-trained. They exchanged glances, the kind rich people give when they've won a round. By spring, the vineyard was no longer mine. At least, that's how it felt. Isabel and Margaret treated my staff like servants, scheduling midnight calls, demanding rehearsals, canceling and rebooking appointments as if the world revolved around their convenience. I tried to bring it up to Jacob, gently. He shifted uncomfortably. It's just stress, Liv. Brides get like this. Don't take it personally. Don't take it personally. Easy words when it isn't your life, your business, your money being consumed. But here's the thing, I could handle the money. What I couldn't handle was the slow erasure of who I was. 3 months before the wedding, I waited for my invitation. Guests started posting photos of cream envelopes embossed with gold. Can't wait for June, cousins texted me. Aunts called, gushing about the calligraphy. I checked my mailbox every day. Nothing. At first, I told myself it was a mistake, a simple oversight. Maybe they assumed I didn't need a formal invitation since I was hosting. But deep down, a knot formed in my stomach. The bridal shower came and went. Instagram exploded with photos of Isabel surrounded by flowers, sipping champagne, smiling with her friends. I wasn't there. No one had told me. When I confronted Jacob, he looked like a guilty child. Margaret wanted it small. Just family. I stared at him. We are family. He didn't meet my eyes. The final straw came when my coordinator, Anna, forwarded me an email chain. Attached was the preliminary seating chart for the reception. I scrolled, looking for my name. Row after row of Huntington cousins, family friends, business partners. But not Olivia Donovan. I felt my throat close as I whispered to myself, they've cut me out. And that was the moment the story stopped being about generosity and started being about betrayal. Because it's one thing to insult me, to dismiss my work, to treat my vineyard like a backdrop for your society play. But to erase me from my own brother's wedding, the wedding I had funded, was war. What they didn't realize was this, you don't cross a Donovan and expect to walk away unscathed. The truth doesn't always come in a thunderclap. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, with a stranger's voice on the other end of the line. That Tuesday, I was in a budget meeting with my vineyard managers. We were discussing barrel orders and spring frost protection when my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. Normally, I'd let it ring. But something in my gut told me to answer. Hello, is this Olivia Donovan? A crisp female voice, polished and rehearsed. Yes. Who's calling? This is Victoria Hayes, the planner overseeing the Huntington Donovan wedding scheduled at your estate. I stepped into the hallway, the stone cool under my heels. Of course. Is there an issue? Silence, then a measured breath. I've been instructed to inform you that your invitation to the wedding has been rescinded. Rescinded. The word landed like glass breaking in my chest. I'm sorry, what? The family has decided to revise the guest list, Victoria continued, as if reading from a script. Your attendance is no longer required. However, they would like to retain the venue, catering, and accommodations you've already provided. For a moment, the world blurred, the hallway, the ledger papers still clutched in my hand, even the steady hum of the meeting behind the door. My voice dropped to a whisper. Let me be clear. They want my money, my venue, my vineyard, but not me? That is my understanding, Victoria admitted, her tone strained. Miss Huntington and her mother felt your presence could create complications. Something about family dynamics and concerns you might be perceived as staff rather than a guest. Staff. After I had built this estate from the ground up. After I had given Jacob the home our parents never lived to provide. Did my brother agree to this? I asked, my throat raw. I was told Mr. Donovan is aware, Victoria said. I haven't spoken to him directly. I closed my eyes. Jacob, my little brother, the boy who once gave me half his lunch when we had nothing, he had agreed to erase me from his wedding. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. Then anger, sharp and cold, cut through the shock. Victoria, I said, my voice suddenly steady. Do you know who I am? A pause. You're the groom's sister? I'm also the owner of Donovan Vineyards and Estate, I replied. The venue, the catering company, the accommodations, all of it. Every contract, every deposit, every detail runs through me. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. I wasn't aware. I figured not, I interrupted. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to deliver a message to Isabel and Margaret Huntington. Tell them that unless I receive a formal apology and a reinstated invitation by 5 o'clock today, the entire wedding is cancelled. The deposit will be forfeited, and the estate will no longer be available. Silence. I could almost hear her heart racing. Miss Donovan, cancelling a wedding this close to the date is highly irregular. We have over 200 confirmed guests, international travel arrangements. Then they should have thought of that before cutting the owner out of her own brother's wedding, I snapped. Tell them the clock is ticking. And with that, I ended the call. For the first time in months, I felt calm. No more swallowing insults, no more playing the accommodating sister. This was my line in the sand. By 4 o'clock, my phone was a storm, calls from Jacob, from Margaret, from Isabel herself. I let them all go to voicemail. My inbox filled with frantic subject lines, urgent. Please call. Wedding contract. At 4:45, my assistant appeared at my office door, wide-eyed. Olivia, they're here. They? Jacob. Isabel. Her parents. They brought the whole entourage. I stood, smoothed my blazer, and nodded. Show them to the conference room. Not my office. Because this was no longer a family matter. This was business. The air in the room was thick with tension when I entered. Isabel sat rigid, her hands clenched around a designer clutch. Margaret's lips were pressed so thin they almost disappeared. Her husband, Charles, hovered like a man used to throwing his weight around. And Jacob, my Jacob, looked like a stranger, shame and anger warring on his face. What the hell do you think you're doing? He demanded. I stayed standing, hands folded calmly. I'm enforcing the contract. Section 12, to be exact. The one that allows me to cancel any event that violates the estate's core values, respect and integrity. Integrity? Margaret scoffed. This is absurd. There was simply a miscommunication about the guest list. Was it a miscommunication when my name was removed from the seating chart? I asked evenly. When the bridal shower happened without me? When my cousin received an invitation I never saw? Isabel's cheeks flushed. This is our wedding, Olivia. We have the right to decide who attends. Not when you take $65,000 of my money and expect me to host it, I shot back. That's not a right, that's fraud. Her father stepped forward, looming. You realize we can sue you for breach of contract. I met his gaze without flinching. You're welcome to try. But every email, every seating chart, every piece of evidence shows exactly what you attempted, using me for my money and business while erasing me as family. For a moment, no one spoke. Even Jacob stared at the carpet, avoiding my eyes. Finally, I turned to him. So tell me, Jacob. Is this what you want? To marry into a family that sees your sister as staff? To throw away everything we built together for their approval? His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. And in that silence, I had my answer. It was the moment I stopped begging for respect and started demanding it. What none of them realized was that the wedding was no longer their game. It was mine. The conference room felt smaller than usual, as if the weight of unspoken words pressed against the glass walls. Margaret Huntington sat like a queen stripped of her throne, her pearls gleaming but her composure cracking. Isabel fidgeted with her clutch, lips trembling between rage and fear. And Jacob, my little brother, looked like he'd aged 10 years in one afternoon. I remained standing. Position matters in moments like this. Here's the truth, I said, my voice steady. Either I am included in this wedding as family, or there is no wedding at Donovan Estate. The choice is yours. Margaret scoffed, waving a manicured hand. Empty threats. You wouldn't dare cancel such an important event. Think of your reputation. Think of the scandal. I leaned forward slightly, holding her gaze. Do you think my reputation suffers because I refused to host an event that tried to defraud me? Or because I demanded respect in my own home? Her mouth snapped shut, color rising in her cheeks. Isabel finally broke. This isn't about you, Olivia. This is my wedding. I should decide who sits in the pews, not you. You're right, I said calmly. It is your wedding. And yet, without my vineyard, without my hall, without my money, it's nothing but a dress and a date. Her eyes flashed with fury. You're trying to ruin me. No, I replied. You did that yourself the moment you decided to erase me. Jacob shifted in his chair. Liv, please, he started, his voice low, almost pleading. We can work this out without ultimatums. I turned to him, and for a heartbeat I saw the boy who used to trail after me in the vineyard rows, the boy who trusted me to keep the lights on when Dad was gone. Jacob, I said softly, I give you everything I had for this day. My money. My estate. My time. And all I asked for in return was to be treated like your sister. Was that really too much? He dropped his gaze, shame written across his face. Margaret pounced on his silence. Jacob understands the importance of appearances, she said sharply. The Huntington name cannot be tarnished by unnecessary drama. Appearances, I echoed, my voice edged with steel. That's all this has ever been to you. Appearances. Status. Power. But family isn't an appearance. It's blood and sacrifice and loyalty. Things you wouldn't understand. For once, Margaret had no retort. Charles Huntington, Isabel's father, finally spoke. His voice was quieter than expected, carrying more weight than his wife's shrill commands. Let's be practical, he said. Miss Donovan, what is it you want, exactly? Money back? Recognition? I met his eyes. Respect. A formal apology from both the bride and the groom. Public acknowledgement that my contribution was a gift, not a transaction. And my rightful place at my brother's side, not hidden away like an embarrassment. Isabel slammed her hand on the table. This is extortion. No, I corrected smoothly. This is called setting boundaries. Something I should have done months ago. Jacob flinched as if struck. His hands curled into fists on the table. You don't understand the pressure, he muttered. The expectations, the guest list, What expectations? I interrupted. To become someone you're not. To marry into a family that can't see you without first tearing down everyone who loves you? That's not expectation, Jacob. That's control. For the first time since Isabel had walked into his life, I saw doubt flicker in his eyes. Margaret's voice dripped with venom. You think you're saving him, Olivia? You're destroying him. You're jealous. That's all this is. I laughed softly. Jealous? Of what? A family that measures worth by money and pedigree? No, Margaret. I'm not jealous. I'm furious. Furious that you thought you could buy my brother's loyalty by erasing mine. The room went still. Isabel's voice cracked. Jacob, say something. Tell her she's wrong. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His silence was louder than any speech. Finally, I straightened and gathered my papers. You have until the end of the day to decide. Apology, respect, inclusion, or no wedding. My staff will begin cancellation procedures at 5 sharp. I turned for the door, but paused to look back at Jacob. I meant what I said. I love you. But if you choose them over me, you'll lose me. And I won't apologize for drawing that line. And then I left the room. The rest of the day, the vineyard buzzed with whispers. Staff saw the Huntington entourage storm out, red-faced and flustered. Calls flooded my office, demands wrapped in desperation. But I didn't answer. I poured myself a glass of last year's Sauvignon Blanc and walked the rows of vines as the sun dipped low, letting the silence settle around me. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Because here's the truth, family doesn't get to erase you. Not when you've built your life from ashes. Not when you've carried their weight on your back for years. And if they try? Then you remind them who you are. 5 o'clock came faster than I expected. I'd told myself I would be calm when the deadline passed, but by 4:45 my pulse was hammering. Every ring of the office phone, every vibration in my pocket, felt like a test of will. My assistant poked her head in. They're back. All of them. Do you want me to? Send them in, I said. My voice was steadier than my hands. They filed into the conference room again, only this time the fight had drained from them. Isabel's eyes were red, her mascara smudged. Margaret looked carved from stone, silent but furious. Charles carried a folder, probably full of legal threats that meant nothing. And Jacob, he looked tired. Just tired. I sat at the head of the table this time. Position matters. So, I began, what's your decision? Charles cleared his throat. Miss Donovan, after careful consideration, we are prepared to issue the apology you requested. In writing. He slid a paper across the table. I didn't pick it up. And? Isabel's lips trembled. And you'll be included. Officially. Invitations, programs, everything. You'll be seated with family. I folded my hands. And acknowledgement of my contribution? Margaret's voice was ice. It will be listed as a generous gift from the groom's sister. Is that satisfactory? I let the silence hang until Isabel shifted uncomfortably. Then I nodded once. It's a start. The apology arrived the next morning, printed on Huntington letterhead. Isabel's section was stiff, clearly written by lawyers. We regret any misunderstanding. We acknowledge Ms. Donovan's generosity, empty words in elegant font. But Jacob's portion stopped me cold. His handwriting, not typed. Just a few sentences. I'm sorry, Liv. I should never have let things get this far. I lost sight of what mattered. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope one day I'll earn it back. Jay. For the first time in months, I believed he might still be the brother I grew up with. The rehearsal dinner was the true test. I arrived in a navy gown, elegant but simple, determined not to shrink. Conversations hushed when I entered. Some guests stared, others whispered. Isabel pasted on a smile, but her eyes burned. Jacob was at my side in seconds, kissing my cheek, leading me to a seat of honor near him. Margaret avoided me completely. Charles shook my hand with surprising warmth. Isabel forced pleasantries through gritted teeth. The performance cracked only once, when a server stumbled with a tray of wine glasses. Isabel hissed at him, sharp and cutting, her voice carrying further than she realized. Jacob's head snapped toward her, his jaw tightening. He said nothing, but I saw the crack widen. Later, on the terrace, Jacob joined me. The city lights reflected in his eyes. "You look beautiful tonight," he said quietly. "Thank you. So do you." He sighed, shoulders sagging. "Do you remember when we used to sit on the roof after harvest? You'd talk about running a vineyard, and I'd talk about building houses." I smiled faintly. "Yeah. Life turned out different. Better in some ways," he admitted. Then his voice lowered. "Liv, do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life? Like you woke up one day, and you don't recognize yourself?" I studied him. "Every time I tried to be who people wanted me to be instead of who I am. But I learned the hard way, pretending costs more than it gives." He nodded slowly. "I don't know if I'm making the right choice." Before I could answer, Isabel appeared in the doorway. "There you are," she said sharply. "Come, Jacob. The Harringtons are leaving." He gave me an apologetic look, then followed her inside. But his hesitation told me everything. The seed of doubt was planted. The morning of the wedding dawned perfect: blue sky, golden vines, a breeze soft enough to carry music but not topple flowers. The estate gleamed. My staff had outdone themselves, even under impossible pressure. I stood near the hall as guests arrived, listening to the whispers. "Isn't that the sister who? Didn't she almost cancel the whole thing? She owns this place, you know. Let them talk." I held my head high. The ceremony began. Jacob stood at the altar, handsome in his tuxedo but pale. The music swelled. Isabel appeared at the top of the aisle, radiant in a gown that glittered like starlight. Guests gasped, cameras flashed. And then, the words. The ones every minister speaks. "If anyone has just cause why these two should not lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now, or forever hold their peace." Silence. Jacob turned his head. His eyes found mine. And in that instant, I saw it, clarity. Recognition. The boy who once promised we'd always protect each other had returned. "I have something to say," he announced, his voice steady. Gasps rippled through the hall. Isabel froze, bouquet trembling. And I knew, this story wasn't over. The room held its breath. 200 guests leaned forward in their chairs, waiting for Jacob to finish a sentence no groom is supposed to start. "I have something to say," he repeated, his voice louder this time, echoing off the stone beams of the hall. Isabel's bouquet shook in her hands. "Jacob," she hissed, forcing a smile at the crowd. "Not now." But he didn't stop. He looked directly at me. "I can't do this." The words detonated like a bomb. Gasps rippled through the room. Margaret clutched her pearls. Charles muttered a curse under his breath. The minister stammered, "Son, perhaps we can." "No," Jacob said firmly. His voice had found steel. "Not like this. Not when I'm not being true to myself, or to the people who have always stood by me." He turned to Isabel, and the fury on her face could have set the vines outside ablaze. "Isabel, you're beautiful. Accomplished. You'll make someone very happy one day. But that someone isn't me." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Isabel's eyes widened, her mouth opening and closing with no sound. Jacob took a breath, his voice carrying. "For months, I've been trying to fit into a world that isn't mine. I traded loyalty for approval. I let people erase the one person who has always been there for me, my sister. And I realized that if I married you today, I would be saying that was okay. That she didn't matter. That I didn't matter. And I can't do that." He turned to me again. Our eyes locked, and for the first time in months, I saw him. My brother. Not the polished stranger chasing prestige, but the boy who once swore we would survive everything together. "This wedding is cancelled," he announced. "I'm sorry to everyone who traveled, to everyone who spent time and money to be here, But I won't marry into a family that measures love by status and erases the people who built me. Olivia, his voice cracked slightly, you've always been my real family. And I should have remembered that sooner. Chaos erupted. Margaret sprang to her feet, shrieking. How dare you humiliate us like this? Charles grabbed Jacob's arm. Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? The alliances? The connections? Isabel's bouquet hit the floor with a thud. She stared at Jacob, her face contorted with rage. You will regret this. You've ruined me. Ruined me. Guests whispered furiously. Some pulled out phones. A few even clapped, quickly silenced by Margaret's glare. Through it all, I sat frozen, heart pounding. Then Jacob walked down the aisle, not with a bride, but straight toward me. He took my hand, gripping it tightly. Let's go, he whispered. And we walked out together. In the quiet of my office, Jacob finally broke. He laughed and cried all at once, running a hand through his hair. I can't believe I just did that. Did you see their faces? I handed him a glass of water. I saw. And I saw you too. The real you. He sank into a chair, face in his hands. I'm going to pay for this, Liv. Financially. Socially. I'll be the man who left a Huntington at the altar. Maybe, I said softly. But better that than being the man who sold his soul to marry her. He looked up at me, eyes red but clear. Thank you. If you hadn't stood up, if you hadn't forced me to see what I was becoming, I'd be trapped right now. And I'd lose you forever. I squeezed his hand. That's what family does, Jacob. The real kind. Not the kind that only smiles when the cameras are watching. The fallout was swift. Margaret threatened lawsuits before the guests had even left their seats. Isabel fainted dramatically into her mother's arms, wailing about betrayal. Charles barked into his phone, already calling lawyers. But nothing they said mattered. The contract was airtight. The deposit non-refundable. Every legal path led to a dead end. My staff, loyal as ever, calmly escorted guests out, apologizing professionally while gossip buzzed like bees. By evening, social media exploded. Hashtags trended. The Vineyard wedding disaster. Leaked videos of Jacob's speech went viral within hours. Some called him reckless. Others called him brave. And me? I didn't care about the noise. All I cared about was that my brother had chosen us, chosen himself, over appearances. The next day, Jacob sat with me in the vineyard, his tux jacket tossed carelessly over a chair. I don't know what comes next, he admitted. But I know I'm not going back to them. Not ever. I smiled faintly, watching the sun spill gold across the vines. Then you're already further ahead than you think. He leaned back, finally exhaling. I thought this wedding was the biggest day of my life. Turns out, the biggest day was the one I walked away.